300 years ago in Joseon, there was a war between humans and monsters, and there was someone who saved the world during the war. People called him the Monster Devourer. Now, 300 years later in the current day, we see an old lady with her grocery bag being escorted by a priest, and the priest takes it upon himself to help carry the lady's bag to her house as they walk on the flight of stairs. And after some time, they arrive at a point where the old lady decides to stop. And the old lady thanks the priest for helping her. And from that point on, her grandson will be coming to fetch her. And as a token of her appreciation, she offers to give him something to drink. And the man, though trying to reject the gift, eventually obliges and takes the drink. And then they continue chatting as the woman talks more about her grandson, talking about how bright of a kid he once was and how he even went to medical school once. But then he got into the wrong crowd, and soon his life turned upside down. And the pastor takes pity on the woman for this. But then his eyes start to faint, and he drops to the floor suddenly. And the old lady states to a barely conscious priest that her grandson is drowning in debt, so she must do what she has to do. And even though he's a priest, she feels no remorse for her actions, as she haggardly smiles at her victim beneath her. Then we shift settings, and we see that the priest has been abducted to an unknown basement, where we see the grandson of the old lady. And we learn that he's planning to dissect the priest's stomach while he's unconscious and on anesthesia, and as the priest starts mumbling some sounds, the old lady rushes her grandson to quickly get on with the operation or else the anesthesia will wear off. And the grandson quickly gets to action as he takes his tools and decides to start with the liver first as he inches in on the priest's stomach. And as the old lady in the background rattles about how ungrateful her grandson is, all of a sudden he screams and jumps to the floor, leaving his grandmother to wonder why he's freaking out. Fearfully, he yells that there's a woman in the priest's stomach, and his grandmother looks at him crazy, thinking that he must have stayed up all night playing too many video games, as it's not possible for there to be a person inside the stomach. But then we clearly see a female specimen inside the stomach as she crawls out of it. And of course, the grandma is utterly shocked at the sight, and the unidentified woman murmurs to herself, as it's been 300 years since she felt fresh air. But the other two, unwelcoming of her arrival on this earth, tell the woman to go away from wherever she came from and ask why she is naked. But the woman simply takes out a strand of her hair and tells them they have opened the gates of and as a reward, she'll turn them into monsters as she blows a strand of her hair into enchantment towards the two, a monster transformation spell. And as the two strands of hair come into contact with them, suddenly the grandson starts feeling something and grabs his stomach when he magically turns into a cyclop monster. And before his grandma could process what happened to her grandson, she too immediately turned into a monster. Specifically, they both turned into level 3 monsters, and the woman addressed them as her two new puppets, as they would be of great use to her. And as the woman looks back to see the person who's behind her, she introduces the fainted-out priest as the monster hunter, Mugwisa. And on his open stomach, out of nowhere, his flesh begins to pull itself and attach the stomach. Taking the opportunity, the woman takes out another strand of her hair as she plans to turn him into a monster. But abruptly, the man awakens and immediately bites the woman's finger. And the woman is simply amazed to see that he could even regenerate in an unconscious state. But the man, not caring for what she has to say, immediately tries to lunge at her with a punch, and successfully, sending her flying into the wall and crashing. When the mutant grandma takes hold of the man with her tentacle, and the priest states that the grandma has the tail of the nine-tailed fox, the grandson decides to join the party and hits the priest with a nasty punch to the face, followed by another uppercut to the jaw and slamming him down with a piggyback hit. And the priest, barely conscious, wonders why he's using wrestling moves. And for the final move, the grandson falls on one leg on top of the man's back, when the woman commands them to stop and tells them not to kill him, and we see she survived the punch, her head covered all over in hair as she approaches the priest. Then she uses her hair to pick him up from the ground and shoves a piece of her hair into his mouth, and she shoves the hair deep into his insides as if she's searching for something. When finally her hair stops and she pulls out what seems to be a blue orb coming out of the man's mouth, and the woman introduces it as the Monster Hunter's Bead, which contains all the monster's souls he has eaten. And the woman takes a bite of it with a joyous smile on her face. And soon the man's hair starts falling off, and his previous youthful appearance dissipates as his vitality shrinks, and he now resembles an old man. But the woman, on the other hand, is only excited about the flavor of the bead. And the man, realizing his situation, decides that he will not allow himself to be defeated. He decides to pull out one last move of his secret technique and concentrate all his remaining strength into his bottom hole as fire starts spewing out of the same area right after. This is his unique magic, which is called the old-fashioned magic technique. And he rockets out of the place through the roof, and the woman only gazes upon the sight, and as her minions try to go after him, she orders them to stay behind, as it's nearly impossible to catch up with that technique. And rather than that, she wants them to let everybody know the Hell Demon is back to turn the world into hell. And we learn that she's a level 1 monster, a demon summoning type. Then we shift scenes to 4 high schoolers at noon in the middle of the park, where 3 students are bullying a small student, and the 3 bullies order their victim to eat the load of chocolate nuts on the ground, and to not leave a single packet behind, and the boy, being afraid, does as they say, and simply thanks them for their generosity as he gets a slap to the face and is told to immediately start eating, as they had to pay a lot of money just to buy all the packets of nuts. We learn that the bullied boy's name is Go Young, but his bullies call him Ho. He begins to state that he's been bullied ever since he was young because of his petite build, and the bully in front of him who slapped him is Kang Jong-bo. And as he films Go Young eating the nuts, Go Young continues to elaborate that he and Jong-bo used to be friends since they were kids, born and raised in the same neighborhood, and that he was the only real friend he ever had. But suddenly, when they entered high school, he became a bully. Then Go Young begins munching down on the chocolate nuts. He's on his 15th pack and is left with 35 left, and he continues to munch on them, and they threaten him to not even vomit as his supposed childhood friend Kang Jumbo smiles as if what he's seeing is something entertaining to do, as Go Young describes how much his change has disturbed him. But when the trio gets bored, they decide to go out for drinks, and our main character is relieved at this, thinking that he can stop eating. But then, to his disappointment, the bullies only tell him to start eating faster and give him 5 minutes to finish up. And he only replies by saying, okay, but he knows it's impossible. After some time has passed, we see him holding onto a tree and vomiting, wondering why he's been tormented like this, and wondering to himself how he doesn't gain weight with how much he's eating. When he hears a weird sound coming from the distance and sees an elderly man crawling on the floor. When he goes to check on him, he sees the previous priest, who's now turned into an old man, lying on the floor. And quickly, he asks the man if he'd be okay, telling him to hold on tighter as he will call 911. But the man only murmurs, "The Hell Demon has awakened, and the Hell Demon will summon monsters from hell. She is trying to open the gate of hell." But Go Young thinks he's a crazed man and continues to call 911. When the man grabs his hand and tells him he isn't joking. If the gates of hell open, the distinction between the world of humans and hell will disappear, and the world will literally turn into
H-E double hockey stick?
And our boy, for a second seemingly taking it seriously, asked the man, what should he do? And the old man tells him he should eat him as he stands up, and the main character only stares in utter shock. And this time, seriously, he starts dialing 911, telling the man he's getting too excited and taking off his clothes. But the old man with no consent grabs onto his mouth, stretches it wide, and tells the boy he will give him ugly Sizz power. And from now on, he will eat monsters and fight for the sake of humans as he enters his body into the boy's mouth. And he apologizes for passing such a cruel fate to the young boy. Our main character is left shocked, scared, and disgusted at the fact that the old geezer just went into his mouth. When he is called by Jong-bo from a distance, who seems to be drunk, he tells Go Young that he decided to come back as it's still our main character's birthday. And he has to drink a couple of bottles of alcohol against his own will, of course. But our boy is still shocked at the revelation he just experienced. He asked Jongbo if he saw an old man, but Jongbo, not caring as to what he had to say, told him to stop talking nonsense. Then, out of nowhere, Go Young's mouth stretches, and he eats up Jongbo. As Gyung tries to comprehend the situation of what he has just done, Jongbo struggles to stop giving him the head and grips his mouth, and after a bit of a push, he eventually manages to escape Gyung's mouth. And Gyung tries to explain to himself that he didn't force him to give his head, and that he doesn't know what's happening when Jongbo shouts, "Muk-wi sa," in question. And Go Young gets confused, wondering who that is. And with a confused expression on his face, Jongbo clarifies that he is Muk-wi sa, the monster devourer. But Gyung answers that he doesn't know who that is, and out of context, Jongbo is surprised to see that Gyung doesn't know who Muk-wi sa is, as if he were supposed to know, and as Gyung tries to wrap the statement around his head, out of nowhere, a shoe is smacked on his face, and he's pummeled to the ground with both feet on his face by Jongbo. When Jongbo starts spouting that Gyung really doesn't know anything, and feels as though he has hit the jackpot, Gyung is unresponsive as he's shocked at something else, the fact that Jongbo's face has transformed into a dog's face, and we learn that he is a physical level 7 monster, Geno. Then Jongbo follows up his attack with a right kick to Gyung's stomach, sending him flying and crash falling on a tree as he spits blood. Then Jongbo springs up from the sky, preparing for a Superman punch, and lands it straight in Gyung's face, pummeling him further on the ground. He then starts mumbling to himself about how they say if you eat the blue bead of Muk-wi sa, you will gain tremendous power. He picks up a fallen tree next to him and raises it above his head, prepared to smash it onto Gyung's face as he smiles to himself about how lucky he is. And just like that, bang! He smashes the lower end of the tree onto his face and repeatedly does so, and once he stops to look at Gyung, he grabs onto his shoulder and prepares to eat him whole in order to obtain the bead inside him. And as his mouth nears, Gyung half-conscious sees what is happening in front of him, and thinks to himself that all he's seeing is a dream, and that everything is too much, as he's not only harassed in real life, but also in his dreams. And as Jongbo the demon nears his mouth even closer to Gyung, Gyung hears a voice in his mind asking him what he is doing when he's supposed to be fighting for his life, and Gyung can only question the word, fight, as he doesn't even know how to do that, but instead has just learned to endure it all and wait for the tormenting to end, and letting time pass, and endure again as flashbacks come into his mind of all the times he's been harassed by his bullies. Then he tells himself, with a faint voice, that if he just endures it, it will all eventually end. When the voice appears once again and tells him that just enduring torment will ultimately lead to his death, just running away will only make him the prey, and instructs him to stretch out his fist, for he is Muk-wi sa, the apex predator. He lands his fist against Jongbo's arm, and immediately it's blasted off of his body with as little as no motion from Gyung. And he is left stunned at what he has just done, and Jongbo screams in pain from his lost arm, and he questions Gyung, as he claimed to have not known anything. But before he could continue rambling on, the voice once again in Gyung's head tells him to finish Jongbo before he can regenerate. Jongbo immediately begins to plead for his life, saying that they should just talk things out and that everything was just a joke, and to remember that they are friends. But Gyung clenches his fist at these words and then prepares a punch, and this time with full strength motion, he punches Jongbo square on the neck and beheads him, sending his head flying to the sky. Jongbo then tries to regenerate by turning into the body of a puppy, but Gyung cuts him short as his mouth stretches out and eats him. Gyung looks at the clothes of Jongbo lying on the floor naked, wondering what he had just done, and starts contemplating that maybe it's all just a dream. Out of nowhere, a voice speaks, reassuring Gyung that he's not dreaming, and when he looks to check where the voice is coming from, he is understandably shocked to see the voices coming from his abdomen, as the face of the previously devoured old man appears on his belly button, and he states that Jongbo was possessed by a demon, but Gyung is only surprised to see a miniature head on his belly talking. And the old man nonchalantly keeps talking and introduces himself as Hong Guang-yu, also the previous Muk-wi sa, and he quickly tells Gyung that he doesn't have much time, so he should listen carefully. Originally, monsters were beings that lived in hell, but there were those who came to the human world with the purpose of eating humans. And Young clarifies the eating part, which the old man corrects and starts to explain again that monsters have two ways of eating humans. The first is meat eating, in which they literally chew and eat live human flesh, and the second is soul eating, whereas they absorb human fears. But even with all these, the monsters still have one natural enemy, him being manhwa, he who has never-ending hunger and fights and eats other demons, and that is our boy, Young. But of course there are some humans who can fight back against the demons. I just said that to sound cool. Young kneels in shock at why he was chosen of all people, whereas he can't even fight. But the old man quickly shuts him up, telling him their meeting was not a coincidence, just like his 300 years ago, he says in a sad tone, and it is now Young's destiny to save the world. The old man then starts going back into Young's stomach, and with his final words, he tells him it's a cruel fate, but he must please stop the monsters, and just like that, he was gone. Young stands there, saying the old man is now gone. Then we go to the next day at Young's high school, and we see him sitting in class, thinking to himself that what he experienced the day before was not a dream, as Jongbo didn't come to school, and he recalls how he ate him and gets nervous. But before he could continue, somebody smacked him from the back of his head, and we see a group of kids consisting of one fatso, a mob Shiko wannabe, and a mid girl in the back. They ask Young where Jongbo is, as they haven't reached or seen him, but he lies and tells them he doesn't know where Jongbo is either. Then they go to leave and insult him first for being a low slave who doesn't even know where his master is. Young then decides to also leave to go to the bathroom, and in his mind he states he was the one who killed Jongbo. Feels a sudden sharp pain in his stomach and rushes to the bathroom further, and for some reason the creators decide to show us this man in the process of excretion, and he continues to recap what he has done, feeling guilty even though he was bullied, but doesn't blame it on Jongbo as he knows he was possessed and remembers the times before Jongbo was a monster and tormented him. We get a flashback to when Jongbo was himself and defending Young for being mocked by the other students for his small body and stole his pants, and he gave Young his shirt to wrap around his waist to cover himself, and he walks half naked. Young remembers this feeling that he was his one and only true best friend and starts crying, not believing what he has done, when all of a sudden he hears a sound, flares come out of his butt, and an explosion is heard in his stall, and we see him looking in surprise at the massive shit he has made, and we see that the massive shit he drew out was Jongbo. Damn, how did we move from giving heads to backs being blown out this fast? Then we shift back to the three students who bullied Young, and one of them is complaining about why they still haven't seen Jongbo. And so were the other two when suddenly their teacher entered the class and instructed everybody to take their seat as class was about to start. When the big bully tells the teacher that there's still 3 minutes for lunch, everybody else in the group starts agreeing with him. And the teacher, being a coward towards the students, actually checks his time to see that there are 3 minutes left. But then he insists that since there's not much time left, they should just start class. But the big bully keeps pressuring the teacher, telling him he doesn't want to go out yet and asking if this isn't a form of human rights violation. And the teacher, afraid to stand up to the students, decides to wait those 3 minutes out and head out of the class. He then mumbles under his breath, calling the students pigs, and tells them he'll be back in 3 minutes. But the big bully and those who heard under all that mumbled what the teacher said, called out the teacher for calling them pigs, and then started to create a scene for the whole class. The big bully tells them to record what is happening and tells the teacher, in a smug face, that they'll have to report him to the education office, when suddenly a loud thunder is heard outside and everybody looks back to see what is happening through the window. Everybody sees a gigantic, long, snake-like creature outside, towering over the buildings and even reaching the sky. But the big student grabs everybody's attention, telling them that it's probably just a movie shoot and the CG is too obvious, and everybody else starts agreeing with him. When suddenly the teacher gets a ring on his phone. When he answers the phone, he chats with the person on the other side when a sly grin appears on his face, and he states that he's been waiting for this day for 300 years, and he'll prepare the young meat right away in a menacing voice as we see him shapeshift in front of the students. And this time, with a loud voice, he calls the students pigs again because they were originally his days of food, and we see that the teacher is also a demon. a physical 4th grade demon, the demon teacher, and a hideous one at that. And he tells them the time to return to being livestock has come as he puts his dirty fingernails on one of the students' foreheads and seems to implant something like black goo into his head. And the student smiles unnaturally, as if under hypnosis. And we learn that this is the demon teacher's unique magic trick. Then one of the female students starts freaking out, contemplating if this is still CG, when suddenly the big bully gets hypnotized, charges at her, and bites her on the neck. And of course, she screams out in pain for a while, but then, all of a sudden, her scream turns into a wide grin. Then she attacks the other student, converting him as well. And the demon smiles widely as he feels a sense of nostalgia for waiting such a long time to feel ecstatic again. Then we go back to Jongbo and Go Young, and we see Jongbo waking up from having to come out of Go Young's back, and Go Young, seeing this, is relieved to see that Jongbo is alive, but he questions if it is really Jongbo or if it's the monster, when Jongbo starts complaining that his head hurts, asking Go Young, what is going on and why is he naked? And Go Young responds that he doesn't know and makes up an excuse for why he's in the same bathroom with him. And strangely, the first words Jongbo murmured were that he remembered going back to school with Go Young when suddenly a dog bit him on the way, and Go Young went on to realize what Jongbo had just said. And he thought to himself, there's no way, maybe, possibly. But his thoughts are interrupted when Jongbo yells, why does he have a tattoo on his body? And to confirm his suspicions, Go Young asks his friend, what grade are they in? And Jongbo looks at him confusedly as he answers their question in 9th grade, and then Go Young realizes the fact that the demon form Jongbo never called him by his name. And he seems to think that they're in 9th grade, and he still remembers the day when they were walking together, and finally he realizes that his true friend is back and the demon is gone. But then, just to make sure that he really is his friend, he asks him one more question. He asks Jongbo if he likes games in League of Legends, and Jongbo answers that he has always dreamed of being a pro gamer, and Go Young goes further with the question, stating, what is his position in the game? But Jongbo is only confused as to why they're talking about video games when he's naked and they're both in the same bathroom stall. But he decides to ignore that fact and screams out why his main protagonist is another character when he recalls it being a different character and screams at Go Young for being annoying with his words. Then a tear comes down Go Young's face as he realizes that his friend has truly come back, and he thanks him for coming back. Then Jongbo asks him why he's crying, but Go Young just tells him to wait a moment, as he'll be back. And he breathes a sigh of relief, and he thinks that the memories have been left with the monster, and Jongbo just has his own original memories, when Go Young snaps out of his thoughts when he hears giggling nearby. And when he checks to see where it is coming from, he sees a mob of happy, infected people who have been hypnotized by the 4 physical demons. They begin chanting in sync about how happy they are. And when the monster also notices Go Young, he invites him to join their livestock herd. As Go Young sees the monster, he immediately tries to run away into the bathroom stall, then he locks the door. But the monster begins to laugh, foolishly taunting him, and he keeps spouting nonsense that it's a rule that disobedient livestock are the first to be slaughtered, as the mob of people keep banging their fists and heads against the door in an attempt to break it down. And Go Young wonders why there is a monster in the school, and thinks to escape through the window, when he hears Jongbo asking him about the noise that's going on outside. When Go Young looks back at the stall, Jongbo begins complaining that his head hurts, and he feels strange memories coming into his head and into his mind. He feels as though his head is going to explode, and he cries tears as he questions, why are the scenes of him tormenting Go Young? And he asks Go Young that all of his memories, which he couldn't recall before, are not real, right? And Go Young, who was planning to escape through the window, closes it, realizing that he must now protect his friend, who it wasn't his fault that he became a bully because he was possessed by a monster, and thinks that he must not protect his one and only true best friend from the monsters, as he remembers how he helped him as they were going back on their way home in their flashback. We also see that there was a vicious, hungry dog at the scene of the flashback, and the two stood there wondering why the dog had no owner, when the dog suddenly charged at Go Young. But then Jongbo stepped in to protect his friend, and he instead got bitten by the dog. And after some seconds, the dog seemed to pass away. And Go Young asked his friend if he was okay, and we see the same aura emitting from Jong Bo from the dog, and he stated under his breath that he felt great, indicating that this was the time when Jong Bo was possessed by the monster. The demon made him do bad things to his own friend. And once Go Young sank this in, he decided to stick up for his friend, took away his t-shirt, and told Jong Bo to wear it. And thanks him for always protecting him when he was weak and telling him the memories that are coming back to him are not his because he didn't do them. The monster made him do it. And he walks to the door and opens it, and the monster takes it as a form of sacrifice, as livestock should be. And he thanks him for making his job easier and tells him he'll now be devouring him with that hideous smile of his. Go Young tries his best to resist the nervousness and tells himself he won't run away anymore and he won't endure any more pain anymore, for he is the monster devourer and he will be eating the monster, for he is the apex predator, as he stands with his fist raised.